favorite part.
That's because it's the easiest.
Right. I've always wanted to do this.
Yes.
Hello everyone, welcome to the very first episode of Project She Leads. I'm Nori Joaquin, your host for this series. So you might be wondering, what is Project She Leads? Well, Project She Leads is a 4-week dive into women's leadership. Each week we're going to be covering topics such as what is leadership, how women undermine their leadership, how to use vulnerability to impact your leadership, and how to lead self and lead others. Each week, I'm going to have a special guest to help me dissect each of these topics. A new episode is going to drop every Friday, so be on the lookout for that. So before we jump in, let me tell you just a little bit about myself. So currently, I am a finance manager with an MBA in accounting. I've also held other leadership roles in ministry, such as worship ministry, women's ministry, and media publications. I also have a very large family, which is my live classroom for Leadership 101. Someone else who's not a stranger to leadership is my very first guest, Sophie Estrella. Welcome, Sophie. I'm so glad to have you on Project She Leads.
Thank you for having me. This is so great. I'm looking forward to diving in. I'm just glad to be here.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I am actually an owner and director of a child care center in Allentown, Pennsylvania. So I flew all the way to Chicago for this. This is great. And I also am a coach for women. I help them find their purpose and calling and align it with their career. And that is something that I really, really love. I'm also in ministry. I'm on the core team of our church. And I also I'm part of Sisterhood, which is our women's ministry at our church as well. And last but definitely not least, I'm also a mom and a wife. I have 4 children, 3 adult girls and 1 teenage boy. Almost done.
That's pretty impressive. So let's jump in. So considering all of your experience, how would you define leadership?
So it's funny because as I was thinking about just leadership in general and all the roles that we take in leadership, I kind of thought, let me look up just what a definition really would be. And so one of the things that I had found and what I really liked, I'll go into what I like about this definition, but leadership is really a process of guiding others into accomplishing some goal, objective, or a vision. But I think what sticks out to me the most in that and what I really, really like about it is that it's a process. It's a process of guiding. And so it's not a one and done. We are definitely leading in every area consistently. So that was something that really stuck out to me in leadership.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
When I think about leadership, something that comes to mind is a driver's ed teacher. Do you remember taking driver's ed?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so a driver's ed teacher, they're typically in the passenger side of the vehicle. And so while they are teaching someone else to drive, they are guiding them. You know, they're letting them know, hey, you know, at the next stoplight, make a right-hand turn, you know, get onto the expressway, change lanes. But also they are instructing them, you know, slow down, maybe you want to speed up. And so they're also, you know, just giving them advice and teaching them how to be better drivers. And so while they're doing all of this, they never really relinquish complete control. Because even though they're on the passenger side, they have that emergency brake pedal.
Yes.
I know some vehicles have an extra steering wheel.
Yes.
So if things suddenly divert into a really possibly wrong situation, they're there to kind of take over. But one of the other things that comes to mind in thinking about a driver's ed experience is sometimes there are other drivers in the back seat and they get to absorb all of the instruction that's being given. And so they're able to kind of take that, and the next time they're in the driver's seat, they can apply what they've learned from watching the previous driver.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's definitely good. It's funny, I was thinking along with that too is the idea though of the driver's ed in that same story is that, or the driver that's teaching, is eventually they will let go and let you do the leading. And that's part of just learning how to teach a person how to make decisions on their own, as opposed to, so it kind of leads to somewhere it's not just the person constantly, the leader constantly controlling, but also relinquishing that sometimes in certain areas so that the person does learn and develop. So that's, I think, a second part of leadership that we have to, implement as leaders, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things too, when it comes to leadership, is that it's not about titles. And I think so often we do attribute leadership to titles, but it's really more about how you handle yourself, how you handle situations, how you respond, to other people and situations.
Yes, absolutely. We have to be very well versed in all that we, as leaders, not that you have to know everything, but you definitely have to be aware, that really be aware of what's going on around you and how to lead, how to even step back and allow another person to take over. And we'll get into all of that, I'm sure, as we move on. But
so just kind of considering all of that, what do you think are some really good qualities and characteristics of a good leader?
So I think one of the biggest things is, as a leader, is having integrity. Number one, I think that as a leader, if you don't have that integrity, it's really hard for people to want to follow you. One of the other things too is just being able to be bold. Being able to problem solve is a skill that you really have to gain as a leader, just because things can happen at any moment and people will come to you for guidance, and you have to be able to say, okay, let's just do this on the fly sometimes. So that's a huge part of it. I also think just being an encourager and a motivator, understanding where's your staff or where are the people you lead right now, and morale and things like that. Those are other characteristics, I think, that really impact.
Yeah. One of the things I also look for is likability. I feel like likability is so underrated, yet it is so important
Absolutely.
because people are not going to follow if they don't like you. It is so much harder to kind of extract things from people and to really put some power behind your vision when people don't like you. So I think likability is definitely super important, as well as being trustworthy, respectful.
Yes.
Another important quality is being influential. So, some of the things that I try to do is be very observant also as a leader. And one of the things that I have observed is that men lead much differently than how women lead. So what are some observations that you've been able to pull from that?
I think when I have seen men lead, they're a little more directive. They're a little more directing, should I say, and giving, and they're a little more in the control seat. Whereas I feel like women are a little more inclusive. Sometimes we tend to maybe even lead with our heart a little bit more, as opposed to just, just in our mind. So, those are some differences that impact. But I think the other part to that as well is whether you're a man or a woman, your personality plays an impact in that as well. So even though maybe naturally as a man you are a directing person, there are times where because of your personality you may be able to fall into that maybe more empathetic role. But it just just depends.
Yeah. One of the things that I've noticed is that men tend to lead other men differently than the way they lead women, whereas women lead everyone the same.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the things that we can kind of pull away from that is really understanding our audience, and framing our responses around that.
Yeah.
When you're talking with men like things, they like facts, they like you to be brief, and they want you to be direct.
Yes.
They can't handle all our words, which is really the opposite of how we communicate as women. We like to provide details. We like to use a lot of words, and we are almost always indirect with how we communicate.
Yeah.
Which is no wonder why they have a hard time understanding us. I think sometimes we have a hard time understanding each other.
That is so true.
It is important to really understand, who is my audience, who am I communicating with, and how can I frame my response in a way that is tailored to the receiver of the information. So this is actually a very perfect segue into our next topic, which is emotional intelligence. If you are someone who loves to read about leadership, then this is definitely a buzzword. I'm sure that you've heard of it before. But Sophie, how would you define emotional intelligence?
So emotional intelligence has to do with how do I understand how I am as a leader, and also understanding the people you're leading, being able to be empathetic, being able to know what makes your team tick, and also being well aware of your own strengths and weaknesses, because that's really important. An example of this is in my own, I said earlier that I'm a director of a childcare center, and with my staff, there are times where I'm on an intense call, someone was upset or whatever, and I'm dealing with that, and I walk out of there, and another staff will approach me with a different question, and I'll have the same look, because I show everything on my face, unfortunately. So when I come out, I have to be very intentional to say what my face looks like right now has nothing to do with you. And so then it alleviates the other person to be able to say, okay, now I can come to you, and I know that you're not bothered with me or something like that. So that's something intentional I have to do with that. So being aware of yourself and others, that's basically what emotional intelligence is. So.
I love that. I love that, because there's also like a level of intuitiveness, that's needed with emotional intelligence, and being able to, like, as you mentioned, understand yourself, being able to read a room, as we kind of just alluded to a little earlier, is, being when you're in a meeting and just watching, being observant of those in the room.
Yes.
How are they reacting? What does their body language look like? Are they making any expressions? Maybe they didn't understand a point that was made. Maybe they don't agree with a point that was made. And even though people may not be speaking words, their faces are always communicating where they are, how they feel.
Yeah.
And so if you're observant, you get to see that, and you can pivot. If you're going to be speaking, addressing, you can pivot based on what you're witnessing and seeing, in a group of people. One of the things that also plays into this is working remotely. Post-COVID, there's so many of us working remotely. And sometimes if you're in a meeting, you don't actually have the luxury of being able to see everyone in the meeting. So you kind of have to change how you still read the room.
Yeah.
And so instead of using your eyes to read the room, you actually have to use your ears to read the room.
Yeah.
And you have to listen to the tone that people are speaking with.
Yes, that's so good.
Sometimes they want to speak, and you'll just for a second hear, and so you have to just be so intentional with how you're listening in those meetings, so that you can pause, allow other people to make comments, or even, again, you can pivot your presentation, what you're saying, based on the tone that people are using, in those meetings.
Absolutely. And I think even part of that is helping them feel still included. I think it's hard when you're, on a Zoom and everyone really is in their separate little square.
Yep.
Some will want to not even be on. And so it makes, as a leader, you have to make it a point to say, hey, so-and-so, how's your day? Or even starting off that way. There was something we had talked about earlier. And at another time where I remember you were mentioning how just making sure when you're coming on, you're energetic and showing that emotion, right? Because otherwise they won't be able to see that. So, or really feel that, should I say.
I do remember that, because there are times when I'm very focused and I'm just talking, and all of a sudden I'll be aware that my voice probably has absolutely no emotion, and I probably sound so mean. So then suddenly I'll be like, yes, so, and I just suddenly will change my tone, because I'll just become self-aware. It probably sounds super weird to the other person, but I'm trying to be better at that and to think about it before going into those meetings, so that I always sound friendly and even still approachable, just through the tone of my voice.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's all been obviously we've had to learn a different form of leading with COVID. And so it's been great, though, that we just, as leaders, you learn. I think that's another characteristic, is learning to be flexible and navigate difficult waters, right? And so we've been able to learn that and do that, which has been really great.
And I always, like you said, remain teachable.
Yes. Yeah.
I think we missed that. That
Yeah,
is such
that's a
an
big
important
one.
quality.
Yes.
That's so huge.
Totally is. Absolutely.
Yes, you have to just always be a learner all the time,
Yep.
because I think that, like you said, I mean, this isn't like a destination. And so we're constantly evolving as leaders and becoming better. And, you know, that starts with just being teachable and always just being a learner.
Absolutely. That's huge. That was a good one to mention, actually. Yeah, we forgot that one. Yeah, so good.
Yeah, well, this conversation has been so great as we just dove into leadership and just had a better understanding of what leadership is. So thank you so much, Sophie, for joining me. I just enjoyed all of your insights on this.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. This was great. This is one of my favorite topics, so absolutely love it. Thank you.
Well, thank you everyone for watching. Please give us a thumbs up, leave a comment, and join me next Friday when we talk about how women undermine their leadership. Bye.